Okay, I'm gonna offer my thoughts on dubs real quickly because I'm pretty sure I've talked about this like in a bunch of places, but I didn't even realize I'd never made a video about it, just like an outright, here's my stance on dubs video. I know it's been in Q&As and other places, but people ask me about it all the time. Every time I bring up dubs, someone asks what my overall stance is, so I figured I'd just, outright make a video about it. And it feels weird because the whole sub versus dub debate is like the most ancient and somehow persistent debate in anime fandom. I got my start on anime forums, so I've seen this happen like every day forever back then. And it's really funny to see it drudged up now and have people who still don't seem to have heard every single perspective on it. So I'll just offer mine for those who haven't heard this perspective yet. I am pretty staunchly a non-dub viewer. I don't like dubs. I don't respect dubs. I don't want any business with dubs for the most part. There's about 5 of them that I really like, and they're all cases where both the English voices are stronger than, typical of dubs, and the Japanese voices are not that great. It takes both of those being true for me to want to watch a dub, because for the most part, because the thing is that the dubbing industry in the US is just minuscule and cheap as fuck. There's only a very small pool of actors who work in the anime industry, and none of them are there based on the merit of their talent. None of them are amazing voice actors. They're just people who have an in with the industry, and it's a consistent way to get work. They don't get paid a whole lot, but they get to work on every fucking show, and, you're just gonna hear their voices 1,000 million times. The same fucking people are on every fucking show. And if there's even one of them you don't like, you're basically done with dubs. I hate Vic Mignogna. I hate him both as an actor and as a person. He's in fucking everything, Like, okay, one time I was trying to watch anime with my mom. I just wanted to show, my mom can't stand subtitles, so I was just trying to show her any show that maybe would be acceptable. And so we're flipping through Netflix, and I see Ouran High School Host Club. I'm like, oh, let's try that, The dub was mostly fine. Haruhi had an okay voice. Most of the guys said, fucking Tamaki's voiced by Vic Mignogna, horribly obnoxious voice that it just drills into my fucking skull. I hate him. Hate his voice. So that's ruined. That whole dub is ruined. There's lots of shows like that where like sometimes most of the characters are okay, but then there's that one squealy voiced fuckboy who just completely ruins the whole thing. Or those weird instances where like the English voice actresses try to sound moe and cute, and it just sounds really wrong in English, because you can tell these are, like, more easily you can tell these are 40-year-old women trying to do cute voices, and it just sounds like, yeah, you're just talking entirely through your nose. Like, that's obvious to me. It's not cute. It's fucking weird. Especially when I've been hearing your voice for 30 years. And since the 90s, I've been listening to your voice come out of anime characters. I know you're fucking old, And mind you, that it's not like Japanese voice actresses and voice actors don't, continue to appear in stuff over long periods of time. It's just that the Japanese voice acting industry is way bigger, way more vibrant, and way more of a meritocracy. The ones who are famous, they make way more money. The ones who are good, they become famous. There's not a whole lot of actresses who are like, explosively popular and suck. And there's plenty of like people who you want to hear in every show because they're just that good. And some actors and actresses can become oversaturated. I've heard HanaKana in like 1,000 shows now, but she is my favorite voice actress, so I don't mind that much because she's a great actress and adorable. And they've been giving her over time more roles suited to her voice as it sort of evolves. Like, she's gotten older, and they started giving her older characters and more mature characters, and she's great at playing those as she was playing Moe Girls back in the late 2000s. Not to say that she never plays those anymore, but, you know, just the Japanese industry, like, and I've heard, for instance, that the voice acting industry in Japan is bigger than the acting industry. Like, it's just a much more lucrative and bigger business, and it's more competitive. You know, it's harder to get a start in it, whereas with the dubbing, it's like no one really starts. You just have connections. If you happen to live in Texas near the Funimation building, you know, and you're convenient to have around when they need you for a voice, then, you know, you're gonna get 1,000 fucking jobs. It's the same fucking people every time. The only dubs I've really liked are ones, again, where the Japanese version is not that good. So, like, I don't really care for the Japanese voices of Yu Yu Hakusho or Dragon Ball Z, because both of them are shows where, and not to say that they're not well performed, but they're shows where, like, it doesn't help that I grew up with them. They're both shows I grew up with where the characters to me always seemed older and tougher and cooler. And then you listen to the Japanese and they're like, you know, the main characters are voiced by women, or they just sound kind of wimpy and like childlike because they're shonen series. And like, it just sounds wrong to me because I've grown up with those English dubs, and they're both a lot of the same actors in those two shows, but they're not the same actors who are in fucking absolutely everything. And they're just, they are very lively, fun dubs that, you know, I can't really listen to the Japanese version because I like the English version of those two. Or Kodocha, which I've never really watched the Japanese version of, but that's another one where it's like a kid's show, so it's more of this like kiddie-oriented kind of sound to it, whereas the English dub, which has a really strong performance from Laura Bailey, who's the only dub actress I really strongly like. I just love her voice, and I love her in most of the roles I've heard her in. So, you know, her being the main character who talks constantly is a plus in favor of the Kodocha dub. And other than that, Garzy's Wing, because there's no reason to watch it unless you watch it dubbed. And yes, I'm aware of Ghost Stories. I've never watched Ghost Stories, but I'm well aware of what the dub is. Please, like, before anyone, I know the comments on this video are going to be a bunch of, but what about Cowboy Bebop? But what about Baccano? But what about... Just know that the sub versus dub debate is the oldest and most talked about debate in anime fandom history. Everything you have to say about this has been said before. Everything I'm saying has been said before. That's why I've always avoided doing a video about this, because I don't want to hear it. You know, and I hear it anyways, because every time my stance on dubs does come up, then I get bombarded with, what about Cowboy Bebop? What about my Baccano? Look, Cowboy Bebop has a solid dub, alright? I really love Jet's voice. I think it's iconic. He sounds almost exactly the same in Japanese. All of them sound almost exactly the same in Japanese. I really like those Japanese actors. I don't think it makes a huge difference. I think some of the English dub dialogue is more stilted, and I think that where it really suffers is the background characters, all the little one-off characters who have, and that's where a lot of dubs suffer. A lot of the best dubs, the ones that people are like, oh, but this dub's really solid because the main characters sound great. Yeah, but then as soon as some shitty one-episode background character shows up, ruins it. You know, Full Metal Alchemist ruins it. Like, you get these characters who just sound like total shit, and you would not have that problem in Japanese, because it's exceedingly rare that you have just an outright obnoxious voice turn up in a show in Japanese, you know? And there are examples of it. I remember, like, Turn A Gundam having some really obnoxious voice acting in it. But, like, that's like one random example of a show. Like, it's just way more uncommon because there's just so much more solid talent to go around in Japanese dubbing. There's just way more people doing it as opposed to, you know, English dubs, which is just this tiny little itty-bitty group of shitty people. And that's the only reason. Like, I don't have a problem with dubs inherently. I just have a problem with the way that the industry is handled. Like, there's tons of great English voice acting on TV. None of it's in anime. you know? None of the people dubbing, or who are playing the voices in, like, Rick and Morty, or, the Venture Brothers, or like any of the Adult Swim shows, all of those have fantastic voice acting. You know, 12 Ounce Mouse, some of my favorite voice acting in any show. You know, Steven Universe, and any of the like mainstream big cartoons that are on Cartoon Network, most of them have really phenomenal voice casts. None of those people are dubbing anime. And even if they were, they're having to deal with these translated scripts that sound awkward in English, and all these like jokes that don't make sense once they've been translated and stuff. Like the last time I really watched a dub, I was watching Clannad with my ex-girlfriend like 3 years ago. And we were sitting there watching it dubbed because, you know, she watches dubs, and like almost every episode, some character would say something that like made no fucking sense, and I would pause the episode and like reconstruct what they were saying in Japanese and realize that it was like a joke or pun that they just didn't translate into something that made sense in English, you know? And they could do that, you know, like a really good dub would do that, but that's not par for the course, you know? Like, anytime this argument comes up, people say, well, like, well, if they localize it, if they, you know, make it funny in English, then it'll be good. Yeah, I agree. It just barely ever happens, you know? We usually get these bizarre moments where a character just says something stupid that doesn't make sense in English, and you're just like, what the fuck are they talking about? But most people don't seem to think about it. I mean, she didn't think about it at all until I brought up, like, until I would pause the show and explain that stuff, which I'm sure is, well, she seemed to have fun. Some people would probably say, wow, you must be a huge pain in the ass to watch anime with. Well, you know, depends on what kind of audience you like having with you. But yeah, point being that if dubs had great actors, great script writing, you know, great localizations, if they made the show as funny in English as it is in Japanese and really got all the best people working on it, then I would be completely okay with dubs. But even then, it still has to be stronger than the Japanese version. Like, Space Dandy was a show with a you know, a decent dub. They localized a lot of the jokes. It made sense in English. They gave QT that vocoder voice, or whatever, the auto-tune voice, which was a cool, neat little idea that wasn't even in the Japanese version. But I didn't like the English voice of Dandy as much as the Japanese voice of Dandy, and that's enough to make it like, well, I guess I'm watching it in Japanese. You know, like, for me, that is almost always the case. No matter how decent the dub might be, if the Japanese version is better, which is almost always true, then that's the one I'm gonna end up watching, you know? And I understand some people who say things like, you know, oh, I want to watch the shows that take place in America in English because immersion, you know, but immersion means absolutely nothing to me, and I don't give a fuck. I'd rather just hear voices I like. So, there you go.